Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be talking about my fusion plan for getting the Mad Hatter, one of the 5 featured or new featured champions as part of Alice's adventure, the newest campaign in Raid. He's definitely quite an interesting champion. He has a really cool aesthetic. I do like what they've done with all of the Alice in Wonderland style of characters. Even got a little jig there, which is kind of cool. But yeah, he is a Force Affinity legendary support from the Nice Revenant faction here. Pretty good base stats for a support, healthy amount of HP. He almost could be HP based, to be honest with you. It's kind of a crazy amount, 23k, and then 1100 on the defense, 108 on the speed, so pretty darn quick. A little boost in the accuracy relative to the base of 0. In terms of his abilities, on the A1 we have a double hitter, 50% chance to steal a random buff, and then each hit also has a 100% chance when booked of applying debuff spread, taking one random debuff from the target and placing it on all other enemies under Hex, which is nice because he does have Hex in his kit on his A2 AoE attack here, 100% chance when booked on a 3-turn cooldown of placing Hex and a weaken. But that's not all. He also has a mini Teox A1 here, in that the ally with the highest crit damage will team up and join the attack. They'll use their default skill, of course, and the damage dealt by that ally will increase by 10% for each debuff on the target. And then on the A3 we have some buff manipulation, increase the duration of all buffs by 1 turn on all allies and decrease the duration of all debuffs on all allies for 1 turn. So that can be partially a mini cleanse in some situations, depending on the duration of the debuffs on your team. And then why not? It also has a turn meter fill of 20% for all allies. Then we come to the passive, which is definitely a lot more than meets the eye. Every 10 turns taken by allies, it will heal all allies by 20% of their max HP. Not his, unfortunately, but still it's a pretty good heal, 1/5 of one's HP. But more importantly, every 6 turns taken by enemies, it will place True Fear debuffs on all enemies for 1 turn. Now, if you have a fairly slow Mad Hatter, and your enemy is just going, taking a lot of turns, eventually they're going to start true fearing themselves a ton. And from what I've seen from test server footage, that can be absolutely devastating. So just keep that in mind if you happen to go against him in the near future. This true fear part of the passive is definitely more of an arena type ability, and of course this is definitely going to be a polymorph magnet, but depending on what you have to deal with on a regular basis for your level of PvP, this passive can be very strong in neutering your enemies, or at least disrupting what they would want to do by constantly placing true fears. So what's my vibe on this champion? How would I grade him? I think he's a solid like B+, maybe even A-, depending on what you need. I know a lot of people didn't end up going for Aosta Dreamsong last year when her fusion came out, and having a champion who can pair well with an Ugo who brings decreased defense and block buffs, he adds in the Hex and the Weaken, and so they can be a pretty solid combination when it comes to building the core of a solid Hydra team. Plus he also does have the buff extension ability, which does pair well if you have Veil on your team to try and avoid the fears, on top of potentially being able to cleanse off the fears depending on whether or not he has this ability and whether or not he's feared himself. Despite having the true fear in his kit, I don't really see him doing much in terms of wave content, because you really don't want the enemies taking that many turns in order to have this proc. But I do think he might also be kind of handy in the Cursed City, where sometimes it's unavoidable for the enemies to get turns unless you have them under full lockdown. And true fear is not my favorite form of CC. I consider it to be a soft form of CC, where hard forms of CC are like stun and freeze and provoke, block active skills, things that are guaranteed to do what they do when it procs. So if you do have the resources, I do recommend going for him, especially if you're looking for help in Hydra, because like I said, he can pair extremely well with an Ugo who's an epic that most people should get eventually, and he can add the Hex and the Weaken to the block debuffs and decreased defense and form the core of a solid Hydra team. So if you are interested in picking up the Mad Hatter, let's hop over to the Fusion Plan spreadsheet, which will be linked in the description box down below if you want to check it out for yourself and talk about what it's going to take to get this guy on your account. When it comes to the fusion itself, this is a pretty standard fusion. Note that this is a hybrid style fusion, which might factor into your decision, meaning that you're going to have to collect fragments for 4 of the epics and then level them up to level 50 and ascend them, and then fuse those into the Mad Hatter himself. For the fusion events and tournaments, we do have the standard 4 dungeon split. We have 2 classic arena tournaments. We have a champion training tournament, champion chase tournament. We have 3 divers, 3 artifact enhancement, champion training event, as well as a summon rush. But we do also have a bonus summon rush where you have the chance to get 50 more fragments for the epic. In terms of the noteworthy elements for this particular fusion, like I mentioned, it is a hybrid hybrid style. Note all the 25s here signifying the fragments to get the epics for each of the events. As always, there are a couple of pinch points, meaning an overlap between champion training and some sort of dungeon tournament. So we do have the champion training event overlapping with Fire Knight and a little bit of Spider, and then the champion training tournament is overlapping with half of Ice Golem and half of Dragon. The fusion itself is starting on a Wednesday, which is definitely something we haven't seen for a while, but I don't really think the start date matters all that much. This weekend we are headed into the champion chase first as the initial summoning event. I believe we're due for 2x sacreds, but this is a guess. I'm sure by tomorrow that will be confirmed one way or the other, so it's a question mark for now, but that's my prediction that it's going to be 2x sacreds. Then the following weekend is going to be the summon rush, the base summon rush, and then there's also this bonus summon rush out here. To dive into that a little bit more, let me explain what's going on the right hand side of the spreadsheet for those who are unfamiliar. We have all the different tournament and event milestones listed here. Anything marked with an asterisk is a predicted amount, meaning it's based on historical precedent and it is an educated guess on what the value might be. And then things marked with parentheses show you the amount of the respective item that I used in any given event or tournament. So when it comes to the summon rush and the bonus summon rush, this is kind of a copy of what we saw for the Thor fusion, which was also a hybrid style fusion. And the main thing I want to emphasize here is that a lot of people might think that, well, there's 2 summon rushes and the second one's going to give me more, so I might as well skip the first one and just focus on the second one. But I will say that either way, getting the 25 node is going to be roughly the same cost. At least that's what it was for Thor. It was 3,000 for the main summon rush and then 2,750 for the bonus summon rush. If you wanted to get all of the extra 50 for Thor, it was all the way out at 5,500, which is ridiculously expensive. But at the same time, it is also the bonus summon rush. So you're not forced to go all the way out there if you don't intend to. It's up to you how you want to play it. I typically play things more on the cautious side. So if I could get things done earlier, especially if it's going to cost me the same amount of resources, I'm going to opt to do that. So you can see that my plan is to try and go with 6 sacreds in the summon rush and then not do anything for the bonus summon rush. However, it is also worth noting that for Thor's fusion, this was also the start of a Titan event, so I was forced in the end to pull for this, even though I had skipped the summon rush, so I might want to consider that going in the future. And there also happened to be a sacred pogo event, or pull one get one, during the bonus summon rush, which was also an added incentive to pull. I cannot guarantee you that it's going to be an exact copy of what they did for Thor, so take all of that with a grain of salt, but nonetheless it is something to consider that perhaps maybe if you don't like the champions being offered in the Progressive Chance events over the following weekend, then it might make more sense to take your chances with the bonus summon rush that's going to be in the middle of next week, and presumably there's going to be a new slew of boosted champions in that one as well. The last thing to point out in this main tab here is the energy plan. This is just how I plan to use my energy over the course of the entire fusion. It's not necessarily a guide or recommendation of how you guys should spend your energy, but just cataloging how I plan to spend my energy. In the next tab over, just because this is a fusion where it's applicable, we also do have a fusion potion calculator. So we plugged in the Mad Hatter, which requires a hybrid style fusion, meaning we just have the 4 epics that are void affinity. And so this is the amount of potions you're going to need to do it. The good thing is the least common type of champion that everyone's going to have is void, just because of their scarcity. And so it should be relatively easy, assuming you are farming Ultra Nightmare Clan Boss on a regular basis, to get or have the 24 superior potions. And then you just need to worry about making sure that you do have the 12 arcanes. However, if you're not in that situation where you're not sitting on 24 superiors, then back on the fusion plan tab, just take stock of the fact that the void keep is only going to be open twice during the course of this fusion, and once the Mad Hatter goes away, you cannot fuse him. So do not screw yourself over and make sure that you do have enough of the void potions to actually fuse the epics into him in the end. Popping back in the game, let's talk about some of the current events going on in the game, starting off with the overall supply count. For every fusion, I do like to document my supply changes in terms of silver and gems, just because a lot of people are under the impression that fusions are extremely difficult to do on a regular basis. Being in the end game, I am capable of doing every single fusion, and so I do, and thus I do like to share what it actually costs for me to achieve said fusions. So be sure to check out my community tab page in a couple weeks time once the fusion is over for a summary of the supplies used to get the Mad Hatter. So the benchmark for this fusion is going to be 4650 on the gems and 70 million on the silver. And I know you're thinking, what do you mean? Clearly this is 54. Well, I've already completed the first artifact enhancement event. As you can see here, I went all the way out to the 4775, and I was saving these gems just to not add them to the total. But yeah, I went a little bit over just to get the dust. But I already took care of the first artifact enhancement, and so I spent about 15 million silver to get that done. And so that's why I'm benchmarking it at 70 million, which was where I was this morning when I was working on that event. And we might as well look at some of the other events going on right now. There's champion training that's already begun. It goes on for 4 days. My plan is to go all the way out there to the legendary tome, which is just what I normally do. But if you're just trying to min-max and get the fusion itself, all you need to do is get up to 6,000 points, which is very, very reasonable over the course of 4 days. Another thing to consider is the fact that there is a Dungeon Divers event that starts tomorrow, at least relative to my time zone. And so I'm actually holding off on participating in the Fire Night tournament that is also live for the next 3 days. So we're just not really doing anything with this at all until Dungeon Divers starts, just because you get a lot more credit for running dungeons versus the campaign in terms of Dungeon Divers points. For that reason, also, I'm not really going to spend any energy from today, like the reset. I'm not going to collect this or anything like that until Dungeon Divers is live, even though I'm going to be running both the champion training and the Fire Night together. And then a little bit of insight into my personal strategy when it comes to these events and tournaments is typically I save all of my excess energy from like events and tournaments, any game updates and stuff like that. So for example, we can look like the Fusion warm-up. This energy, I exclusively save that for champion training, events, and tournaments. So all of this energy plus the energy that I think was in like the tag team arena tournament from a few days ago that ended, all that stuff, I'm going to be saving that for champion training. But just like with Fire Night, because that's energy that I can claim whenever I need to, I'm going to wait until Dungeon Divers is live before using that in the campaign to level up some champions. So there you have it. That's going to do it for my fusion plan for the Mad Hatter. Let me know in the comments section down below how you feel about his kit. Do you think he's useful? I do think he's going to help a lot of people in Hydra, especially if you did not go for Aos to Dreamsong last year. But I could also anticipate the camp of people that are saying he's probably going to be useless for their account, depending on their situation. And in my case, he's probably not going to do all of that much for me, but maybe he might come in handy in the Curse City. We'll have to see. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And also feel free to hit that subscribe button down below if you are enjoying the content on this channel. Thanks for watching and have a good one.